The Book of Genesis presents discourses that have intrigued scholars for centuries. A closer look reveals that these stories may not only be divinely inspired accounts, but also chronicles about powerful people described in the Bible and mysterious beings known as the Anunnaki, mentioned in the Sumerian tablets. These discoveries were driven by academic studies and archaeological excavations which, since the 16th century, have brought to light more than 200,000 clay tablets, full of engravings that intrigue researchers to this day. In 1800, scholar Nathaniel Schmidt, a professor of Semitic languages at Colgate University, was abruptly removed from his position. For 11 years, he had taught Hebrew, Aramaic, Coptic, Arabic, and other ancient languages, making a significant contribution to academia. However, his daring research into Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian texts revealed parallels between these ancient versions and the biblical stories, which brought him into conflict with the religious values of the time. Schmidt identified striking similarities between Sumerian accounts and biblical passages such as Adam and Eve, the Fall, Cain and Abel, the Flood, and the Tower of Babel. He suggested that these stories have their roots in Sumerian texts written around 6,000 years ago. This idea was controversial at the end of the 19th century, a time when the doctrine of biblical inerrancy was gaining strength in response to Charles Darwin's theories of evolution. The notion that biblical texts could derive from previous cultures was considered unacceptable by many. However, this connection should not be surprising, as both Judaism and Christianity find their origins in Sumerian culture. Abraham and Sarah, central figures in the biblical story, lived in Ur of the Chaldees, a region deeply influenced by Sumerian culture. When they left that land, they took with them stories and traditions that became the basis of their beliefs and later of the biblical stories. It is therefore understandable that the Bible contains abridged versions of accounts found in Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian texts. However, what makes these discoveries even more intriguing is that the original Sumerian texts make no mention of gods in the theological sense. Instead, they describe our ancestors' interactions with a species called the Anunnaki, which raises fascinating questions. Could the biblical stories be re-readings of ancient encounters with extraterrestrial beings? The tablets that aroused Schmidt's curiosity began to be unearthed at the beginning of the 16th century, during excavations in the ancient regions of Mesopotamia. Engraved with peculiar glyphs, their inscriptions have challenged scholars for centuries. While some believed that the glyphs represented an unknown written language, others dismissed this hypothesis, considering them to be merely decorative. For this reason, many of these tablets were archived without being understood. It wasn't until Henry Rawlinson, an explorer and scholar, began deciphering these glyphs in the southwest of present-day Iran in the 1800s. In the 19th century, Rawlinson, a military man in the service of the East India Tea Company, played a much more intriguing role than just training troops for the Shah of Iran. He was there for a deeper purpose, to access the Behistun district, a place of incomparable historical significance. The East India Tea Company, a corporation capable of mobilizing armies around the world, demonstrated that its ambitions went far beyond simple trade. In Rawlinson's case, the interest was directly linked to the Behistun inscription. Carved into a cliff, the Behistun inscription was a royal proclamation written in 3 ancient languages: Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian. Its expression in cuneiform script made it a key to deciphering the descriptions preserved in thousands of cuneiform tablets unearthed over the centuries. These inscriptions transformed our understanding of the ancient cultures of Mesopotamia, revealing that the glyphs were not merely decorative, but detailed records of commercial transactions, contracts, inventories, and royal histories. It was from these accounts that the connections with the biblical stories began to emerge. Can you imagine holding in your hands a key that unlocks secrets that have been hidden for centuries, connecting biblical stories to fascinating accounts of ancient civilizations? This unique opportunity lies in the forbidden name of Jesus. In this revealing ebook, you'll find answers and surprising connections between the mysteries of the Bible and the enigmas of Sumerian texts. And here's the best bit. It's available now as a special gift to you in the first comment box. Allow yourself to explore the knowledge that can transform your view of the past and enlighten your spiritual journey. The discovery of these ancient stories caught the attention of scholars such as Nathaniel Schmidt, who faced controversy when he pointed out that the biblical accounts could be rereadings of Sumerian stories. After his resignation from Colgate University, Schmidt found a new home at Cornell University, where he taught Semitic languages for 36 years. During this time, he continued to argue that the cuneiform inscriptions revealed not accounts of God, but of our ancestors' interactions with the Anunnaki, beings described as coming to Earth from the heavens. In the 20th century, Zecharia Sitchin delved into these cuneiform inscriptions, bringing to light interpretations that pointed to the Anunnaki as an extraterrestrial species of great power. According to Sitchin, when these beings arrived on Earth, they became the rulers of the planet. He suggested that the Anunnaki used their own genetic code to create humans as a hybridized workforce, molded to serve them. According to Sitchin, the term Anunnaki itself means those who came to Earth from the heavens, reinforcing the idea of their extraterrestrial origin. Sitchin, however, was not a traditional academic. A graduate of the London School of Economics, he wrote for the general public, without the rigorous references expected in academic works. This popular approach brought criticism from academia, which often dismissed his contributions as inaccurate or speculative. Nevertheless, Sitchin's ideas have remained influential, bringing a fresh look to the cuneiform accounts and raising important questions about traditional interpretations. Critics of Sitchin argue that the term Anunnaki could be translated simply as nobility or royalty, referring to human rulers. However, this superficial explanation does not address the deeper questions raised by the stories. Who were these rulers? Why were they associated with the heavens? The etymology of the term offers intriguing clues. Anu means heavens and Kai, earth. Thus, Anunnaki would be translated as those who came from the heavens to the earth, reinforcing the idea of a celestial or extraterrestrial origin. The cuneiform stories also support this interpretation. The glyphs used to describe the original rulers show a direct connection to the sky, indicating that these beings were perceived as coming from elsewhere. These stories are not exclusive to Mesopotamia. Ancient mythologies from all over the world present similar themes, suggesting that governance over human society began with superior beings described as gods who later transferred control to human kings. Egyptian mythology, for example, speaks of a period when the gods ruled before passing power on to pharaohs. Similarly, biblical tradition describes King Saul as the first human king chosen to lead God's people. In Sumerian cuneiform texts, Gilgamesh is named as the first human king, symbolizing the transition from divine to human rule. To be more precise, Gilgamesh is described as a transitional king, a hybrid between human and Anunnaki. His name appears on one of Mesopotamia's most famous artifacts, the Sumerian king list. Amid seemingly mundane records, such as shopping lists, commercial contracts and legal agreements, the list presents what at first glance appears to be a simple account of the succession of Sumerian kings. However, closer examination reveals details that defy common understanding. The most recent entries in the list document reigns ranging from 6 to 36 years, a duration considered normal. However, as we go back in time, extraordinary information emerges. For example, there are records of a dynasty that lasted 24,120 years, 3 months and 3.5 days. This numerical precision reflects the rigor of Sumerian culture, which laid the foundations for concepts such as 360 degrees in a circle, 60 minutes in an hour, and 60 seconds in a minute. Discover the secrets that history has tried to hide. The forbidden name of Jesus is available, but units are running out. Don't miss this unique chance to find out more. Although this accuracy is not surprising, what is intriguing is that this dynasty of more than 24,000 years was attributed to just 23 kings, resulting in an average of more than 1,000 years for each reign. This pattern is repeated elsewhere in the list. The dynasty before the Great Flood, for example, is said to have lasted 241,000 years, divided between just 8 kings. This suggests an average reign of more than 30,000 years each. Some scholars have tried to interpret these dates as symbolic or as the result of a different unit of time. However, this approach runs into difficulties when confronted with the fact that the list seamlessly combines reigns of realistic lengths with others of seemingly impossible proportions. The plot begins with kings described as non-human, who gradually give way to human kings. This transition and the elasticity of the length of their reigns reinforce the hypothesis that these first kings were something other than mere humans. It is possible to compare this situation to the difference in life expectancy between humans and other species, such as ants. The list of kings provides a glimpse of a reality that goes beyond common understanding, suggesting extraterrestrial or mythological influences. Another piece of evidence that points to this hypothesis lies in the Sumerian version of the Tower of Babel. This account mentions 50 technicians using mysterious technology to send 300 observers to stations located among the stars. When read in parallel with the Genesis account, the Sumerian narrative complements and clarifies details. Babel appears as a stargate, offering quick access to space stations. This kind of connection between ancient stories raises intriguing questions and deserves further analysis. In the context of these discoveries, biblical terminology itself comes into focus. The book of Genesis uses 2 different terms to refer to God: Elohim and Yahweh. The latter, known as the sacred name revealed to Moses, is used in texts that describe events long before him. This indicates that these stories were retold in later times, in a different context. There is a consensus among scholars that the Old Testament was edited or written during the 6th century BC. By inserting the name Yahweh into older stories, the redactor seems to have sought to align these stories with the doctrine in force at the time, highlighting their relationship with God. However, this change also suggests that the original versions of these stories were significantly different. Originally, the stories spoke of Elohim, a singularly intriguing word due to its plural form and the plural behaviors it often displays in ancient texts. Expressions like, "let's do it," or "we don't want them to become too much like one of us," clearly indicate the plurality of this entity. Interestingly, Elohim is translated in very different ways: God, false gods, demons, angels, chiefs, or even barons of the earth. This semantic elasticity leads us to explore the roots of the term. When analyzed, Elohim can be interpreted as the powers or the mighty ones, drastically changing the understanding of biblical texts. By translating Genesis in this way, the texts begin to align with the Sumerian narratives, confirming each other and revealing that these are not gods in the traditional sense, but mighty ones, or the heavenly people described as Anunnaki on the Sumerian tablets. The very material existence of a dominant non-human presence on planet Earth raises questions. Why haven't we found any physical remains of the Anunnaki? That's a valid question. However, the more we explore ancient sites, the more we discover the diversity of peoples who inhabited our past. Examples such as Homo floresiensis, nicknamed the Hobbits of Indonesia, the giants of Noble County, the red-haired giants of North America, or the elongated skulls of Paracas are evidence that human history is far from being fully understood. If the Anunnaki really did exist, how can we recognize signs of their presence? One possibility is DNA testing. If Gilgamesh was indeed a human Anunnaki hybrid, testing the DNA from his tomb could provide definitive answers. And this is where an intriguing event comes in. During the invasion of Iraq in 2003, a team protected by American troops reportedly located Gilgamesh's tomb. Archaeologist Jürgen Fassbinder discussed his findings with the BBC, but since then, the official account states that no further investigation has been carried out. The secrets of the past could be the key to transforming your present. Download The Forbidden Name of Jesus now. There are only a few units left, so grab it while it's still available. Another relevant case is that of Queen Puabi, a Sumerian leader from the 3rd millennium BC, whose remains were discovered in 1927 by British archaeologist Leonard Woolley. Modern technology could test Puabi's DNA and confirm whether her lineage was entirely human. However, this possibility remains unexplored. These omissions raise inevitable questions. Why interrupt the investigations? Wouldn't we like to know more? Another important question is, what would motivate an extraterrestrial species to rule over human populations? Why would advanced beings interfere in human evolution, teaching math, reading, legal systems, and other structural elements? What's more, why would they leave afterwards? To understand, we can look at our own behavior as colonizers. History shows that when we colonize, we enter with force, demonstrate superiority, and take control. We provide structures such as police, armies, and educational systems, while exploiting natural resources and securing our superior economic position. After a while, a colony can reach a state where the locals themselves take on key roles, such as policing, teaching, and even government leadership. Banks and courts come to be run by locals, while a local governor occupies the formal leadership. As long as control over the value of money, commodity prices, and exchange rates remains in the hands of the external power, the physical presence of the colonizers becomes unnecessary. Thus, the colonizers can withdraw, enjoying the benefits of economic control from afar without the need for a visible presence on the territory. This model of colonization is not new. It has been practiced from the Roman Empire to the Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, British, and American colonies. The pattern is consistent: establish control, structure the economy, and eventually delegate administrative responsibilities to the locals. Could an extraterrestrial presence have colonized Earth in prehistoric times in a similar way? A species could have resided here temporarily, exploited resources, controlled structures, and then left, maintaining the legacy of its dominance. The similarity between our own colonial patterns and the behavior attributed to the Anunnaki is a question that deserves reflection. What about the goal of such colonizers? Minerals seem to be a plausible possibility. Archaeological evidence indicates prehistoric mines in southern Africa, suggesting that these resources could have been the focus. However, the hypothesis is not limited to this. Perhaps the uniqueness of the Earth, or even humanity itself, was the main interest. Our ancestors could have been conceived as workers, programmed to serve the purposes of the colonizers. Such an idea raises questions about the real role of the Anunnaki in our history. While some discourses suggest a cold indifference towards human progress, others present a more generous perspective. The Greek and Babylonian stories of Oannes and Apkallu, for example, speak of visitors who helped and educated humans. Native American legends mention interactions with interdimensional visitors and extraterrestrials. Zulu mythology describes human ancestors being nurtured by advanced beings. These storylines point to a more complex and multifaceted relationship between humans and these visitors. In Escaping from Eden, it is argued that ancient texts contain memories of encounters with various species. These interactions have shaped our mythologies and expose conflicts between the visitors over the level of consciousness and intelligence they desired for humans. Many of these stories include hostile agendas, such as the limitation of human life, deluges for mass eradication and interference that impaired our cognitive and perceptual capacity. In the Sumerian account, these negative initiatives are often attributed to Enlil, a senior leader among the Anunnaki. However, not all the Anunnaki shared the same agenda. Enki, Enlil's younger brother, plays an oppositional role. Enki is described as a defender of humanity, constantly seeking to improve the human condition. He led the Earth Project, designed to upgrade humans, making them more aware and empowered. This conflict between Enlil and Enki generated many of the events that shaped our ancestral plots. Discover what has been hidden for centuries. The forbidden name of Jesus is almost sold out. Secure your copy and delve into the mysteries before it's too late. When Enlil decided to destroy the human experiment with further planetary devastation, it was Enki who sought to preserve humanity. He chose a favored family, led by Atrahasis, also known as Ziusudra Utnapishtim or Noah, and instructed them to build a spaceship to save their lineage and resources. The Anunnaki description presents a complex mix of influences for humanity. On the one hand, it describes oppression and slavery. On the other, it shows concern for the well-being and care of human beings. This paradox reflects the crossfire of interests and agendas within the Anunnaki species itself, suggesting that they were ambivalent about the progress of human society. This duality is not exclusive to the past. Contemporary accounts of contacts with extraterrestrials display a similar range of intentions, some harmful, some indifferent, and some even inspiring. But a fundamental question arises. Are these modern experiences related to the Anunnaki stories, or are we experiencing something completely different? The answer to this can directly influence the way we understand our own history and identity. If, as the representations suggest, we are a mixture of primates and Anunnaki, what does this mean for us today? Does this knowledge offer us any advantage or guidance? Are the Anunnaki still among us, or have we assumed our role as masters of our own destiny? The Anunnaki discourse seems to explain our initial separation from other life forms on Earth, but it leaves open important questions about our future and our potential as a species. My hope, however, is not centered on possible external interventions, but on our innate capacity for evolution. Many ancestral stories speak of a higher consciousness that was reduced in our prehistoric past. This suggests that our cognitive abilities can be recovered or even expanded. According to these stories, our perceptual field was limited, but perhaps we can expand it, gaining a broader and fuller consciousness. Texts about the Anunnaki often portray us as workers, subordinate to superiors. But what if we could break out of this programming? What if we started working for each other instead of perpetuating systems that favor the few to the detriment of the many? Dismantling the structures that perpetuate environments of neurological slavery can pave the way for freer lives that are less dominated by fear. What would a world where we live more autonomously and collaboratively look like? Ancient cultures that preserved these stories also developed practices to raise the state of consciousness. In ancient Greece, for example, rituals involving the kykeon, a ceremonial drink, were used to expand perception and understanding. In Mesoamerica, similar practices served the same purpose. Indigenous communities in Australia and the Americas use smoke ceremonies to achieve altered states of consciousness. In the Indian cultures that gave rise to the Vedas, practices such as conscious breathing and meditation play a crucial role in expanding consciousness. These traditions offer tools for a fuller and more meaningful human experience. They suggest that increasing our consciousness can be a way of overcoming the limitations inherited from our history. If the stories of the Anunnaki really reflect our origins, what does that say about our potential? Are we doomed to perpetuate the economic and social systems taught by the ancient Sumerians? Contracts, monetary systems, the control of time, or can we tread new paths? The search for higher forms of consciousness can allow us to escape the chains of the past and create a richer, more liberating reality. These practices challenge us to explore our potential as individuals and as a species, offering an opportunity to redefine our history and our future. If you enjoyed the content and would like to support our work so that we can continue to bring you more in-depth research and analysis, please consider making a donation of $100. This contribution directly helps the channel grow and produce even richer material. Thank you very much for your support.